Hello and welcome everyone to another 21st Capital Show. We are today with a very special guest, Robin Seyr, someone that most of you most likely have encountered with, have heard from, but you haven't heard from him directly about his story. You have heard him in conversation with other people, and today what we want to do, we want to hear more from the guy himself. Hello, Robin. Welcome on.
Thank you so much, Momo, for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. I've definitely made a lot more podcasts where I'm the host and not the speaker. I think I made like 20 to 30 podcasts where I was the guest on, but 400 or like 420 now where I was the host and the interviewers are like the ratio is definitely skewed to one towards one direction, and it's also fun sometimes to be the speaker.
Yeah, definitely. So, for those who might not know you, give us a quick background about yourself.
I try to summarize it as like I was in IT security. I was there in account management, sales. I had that background, so I learned how to code. I had an sales background. I actually was leading up a small branch in a smaller company, so I actually got to know how to start a company, how to bookkeep, how to deal with taxes and all that stuff. So I have in my career wise before Bitcoin, with my young age, I already made some interesting experience with software development, but also with the economic sides and with the sales side. This was really good for me in terms of starting my own Bitcoin podcast business. But that's basically a small background to me before Bitcoin. And then when I really discovered Bitcoin, it changed a lot for me. Not only did I discover something that helps me put a financial energy somewhere, because like Bitcoin, for the most part, is good right now, especially for the people that live in the West, to store financial energy. But it really gave me security. It gave me bravery. It gave me something where I can take a risky decision. And 2024, in the beginning of the year, I made the risky decision of leaving completely my job and saying like, okay, like I have 400 YouTube subscribers. Let's do that media company thing. And I had no security. I had no income. I had some income, but not a secured income, nothing stable. And so I was like, okay, I don't know if it works or if there's something there after 2 months, but I have Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is something that is on my side, and I'm prepared to live on Bitcoin for, let's say, 1.5 to 2 years. That was kind of the time frame. I was like, even if I have zero income till then, I will do it that much and try to figure out and try to see where it goes. And luckily, I never had to touch my Bitcoin. Luckily, I had every month a positive cash flow. But Bitcoin was the thing that made me brave and made me do what I did, because I had no other securities. And I had everything in Bitcoin. And then it just started out with like Bitcoin podcast. My knowledge with the Bitcoin podcast about Bitcoin obviously grew a lot. I have around 500 hours in Bitcoin podcasts that I already put in. The next 1,000 hours is coming fast and faster, because now not only I do my podcast, but I also go more on other podcasts. I'm also speaking more on conferences, so the hours accumulate this year faster than last year, even. So probably I will be end of the year somewhere around 1,000 hours talking about Bitcoin in public, which is a fun experiment to do. And that's basically me. I talk a lot about Bitcoin. I learn a lot about Bitcoin, and that's my background.
Beautiful. And how did you, or let me start with this question, because probably most of the people are also curious about that, as I am. And also on your podcast, I mentioned that I am on the verge of leaving my fiat job and focusing 100% on Bitcoin. And I'm hoping that shift is going to happen very quickly. For someone who is on, who is about to make that decision, for me, what kind of advice do you have to share? And for someone who finds it difficult to make that shift? Because I don't want to touch my Bitcoin. I know when the push comes to shove, I have that as a safety net, as a great safety net. Um, but the idea of not having any income and having to use my savings in the hardest money, having to touch that kind of frightens me. Um, what do you have to share in this regard?
It's a really hard decision, and it's a decision that not everyone will do. Only you really have to think of how badly do you want that? How badly do you want to work in the Bitcoin scene, and how badly do you want to pursue that? And if you really, 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 really want that, like me, you will do it no matter what. There will come that day where you just have to realize there's no other way. Like, I have to do it. And I made that decision last year, basically in January, February, around that time, no, like actually January. And this was the hardest decision I had ever took. And it was also the best decision at the same time that I ever took. If you are, and I presume that you are convinced that Bitcoin is the biggest financial revolution that is currently ongoing, and maybe even in the history, and you are now seeing that we are in the starting of that, and you're now seeing that we are having the chance of really changing the financial landscape forever, then you also have to say, okay, like, where do I not only spend my money? And that's probably like already very much allocated to Bitcoin, but also like, where do you allocate your time? If you are spending most of your time still working for something else, I don't want to call it fiat, but if you still work for something else than Bitcoin, maybe you have a better return of investment long term to spend as much time as possible in Bitcoin, even though you might suffer in the short and medium term from it. So it all comes down to personal willingness to actually do it. For me, I just reached a point where I couldn't do it not. Like, I had to do it. And in the end of the day, it's a gut decision and not a logical one. The logical decision is usually stay in a safe job. The logical decision is usually don't do the risky thing. But that's not the decision. If we really want to do something, if we really want to accomplish something, we have to take a step that's maybe not as common as it seems. And it's those people who walk alone, those people who walk a different path, who changed the world. And I didn't change the world so far, but I do hope I can contribute a little bit to that. And with my decision to step out of the safe haven, step out of the safe and comfortable job, I hope it did a little bit good for Bitcoin. And it, my it's hard for me to say, like, okay, let's go and do it, because it also depends on your situation. I'm young. I'm 26. If I lose everything, it's okay to start over with 27. most start with 28. So, like, if you restart with 27, it's fine. So the situation is different if you're like, I don't know, 47, have 3 kids, and maybe are the sole earner of the house. There are more things to consider then than just like me diving straight into Bitcoin. Also, like, from the time wise. So you have to really see it by case-by-case studies. But I really would encourage people to do what's necessary. And I think that's what you are doing is anyways perfect, because you are still working in Fiat, but you're already exploring new opportunities with 21st Capital in your ventures. So this is already the first step of, like, we don't have to dive straight in. My podcast started with 3 months before I went all in and quit my job. So starting first and seeing how is the grass on the other side, is probably a better way of like quitting something and then starting. So there's a that you're good advice to have something that you can rely on, even though it might not be a lot before you make the jump. And maybe you can make even a gradual jump where you scale down your Fiat job slowly, of like getting from full-time to part-time, from part-time to even less part-time, and then like slowly do that transition, depending on what how flexible your Fiat workplace is. But overall, I don't want to take I don't want to give career advice, but it usually pays off if you do what you love and not what you have to do, because you can also fail in the thing that you have to do. Like you can also get fired there.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great way of putting it, that you might fail even at the thing that you do not like, but you think it is safe. So better trying hard in the thing that you love and you enjoy. And I really enjoy what I do for 21st Capital. I enjoy every second of it, and I wish every second of my life was, so from the time I wake up, it's working for 21st Capital till the time that I go to bed. And yeah, what you said is very encouraging and is actually convincing me to make that jump very soon. I will let you know about that once I make that jump. Yeah.
And Bitcoin is also, I want to make the point, Bitcoin is there to use it. If Bitcoin pays, if Bitcoin, because you accumulated Bitcoin, like you want to make generational wealth maybe and give it your kids and stuff like that. But overall, Bitcoin is money and money is a tool, and Bitcoin is there to be used. Bitcoin is there to be used for either buying what you ever always wanted to have, or buying back some of your time and enjoying life a little bit more, or making space, as it was the case for me, to give yourself the security to actually make that jump and that riskier decision. So in that way, it's not bad to use Bitcoin. It would be bad to sell Bitcoin for Fiat or sell Bitcoin for a real estate investment. But maybe it's good to use Bitcoin to try to buy your dream home, where you can found your family in. Maybe it's good to buy, to spend Bitcoin on the dream vacation that you always wanted to take, or travel the world with your family for a year, or like whatever it is. Like Bitcoin is money, and Bitcoin should be used as money. And we shouldn't be so greedy that we like, I never want to touch it, because it's there to be touched. It's there to be used. Bitcoin is still money, even though the incentive is to not use it. But you also should live your life.
Yeah, the incentive is not to use it just without any thought, but you, in fact, do use it. If with fiat money, I was a kind of spender type of person, not too much. And whatever I earned, I bought the things that I wanted to. But now with Bitcoin, and what was the reason? Because I was like, if I don't do it today, have I accumulated more the next year? No. If I don't separate this money, it's going to be spent. And m- something more discouraging than that was that if I, um, for example, save equivalent of 200 euros this month, how much can it buy the next year? And I am not going to be rewarded for that. And as a result, I was not encouraged to save. But Bitcoin is something that is encouraging me to save, but it doesn't mean that I am not going to spend it. It can maintain its value, so you do not have to worry about it losing its value. But of course, yeah, it's money. How you use your money is your business, and of course, if you want to use it on something that makes your life easier and brings more joy to this time in your life, time is more scarce than even Bitcoin, and it is you can probably regain some of the Bitcoin you have lost with working harder, depending when you think about regaining it. But every second lost is never going to come back unless you live in a sci-fi and you can do time travel. And even in a sci-fi world, as outrageous as I think, I cannot think about time travel to the past. Uh, let's digress. What do you think about the possibility of going to the past? Do you think it is possible?
I think we would already kind of know it. I don't think that time travel is a real thing. I'm really extreme with like what's possible. I do think that we have aliens around us somewhere. I think it would be an arrogant stance to have that we're the only living intelligent species, and there are no other planets out there. I think it's just a matter of time till they discover us, or we discover them, or we already discovered them, or they already discovered us. But in terms of time travel, I didn't go deep down that rabbit hole, but maybe it's possible, maybe not. But I think to a certain extent, Bitcoin is time traveling. Like if you save your financial energy and your time in Bitcoin, you are slowing down your time in a good sense, because you get more time back, because
Wow.
all of a sudden you can make your life longer. You can make your life not longer, but in a sense you get more life into the time. And yes, it's true, you can always make more Bitcoin, and you can never make more time. But at the same time, you have to preserve your time and your energy very, very good. So if it's something very, very important to make that jump out of Fiat, and you're willing to do that, that's a good decision if you really value that. If you're just trying to do that for an experiment, maybe you're not as willing to do that as you should be. So Bitcoin brings back for us the value of what's really good and what's really bad. So we have to. It brings back the real value of things. Like what do we really value, and what do we don't value that much. So that's kind of the point of that.
100%. To dial back to what you said in the beginning, you said that your background in IT security and also sales helped you with your Bitcoin podcast. There are other aspects that I want to get to too, but before, how did these things translate into your success as a Bitcoin podcaster?
Uh, it's more on the back end side of things. So like, it's more on the side of like, how do you set up a business? How do you manage it? How can you set up the processes? How can you work with other people? It's less of like having an actual podcast, but once you figure out a little bit like how the business processes work, and how sales processes work, and all those things, and the communications that you need, it really doesn't matter what exactly it is. There's some principles that you learn in business and in careers that are true whatever you do, no matter if you have a podcast or selling I don't know, like flowers online. It's pretty much the same thing, but from a business perspective. And it would be probably way harder for me if I didn't have that base layer of understanding how business works, with starting a new podcast, with also having to learn of how to start a company, with also having to learn how to do bookkeeping. Because guess what? In the beginning, you cannot afford someone that does your bookkeeping, your taxes, and all the things. And only slowly over time, you get to outsource those things. So it's really important. It was really important for me to have some experience and to have some knowledge around things other than Bitcoin. The Bitcoin knowledge actually grew a lot. So I thought I know Bitcoin quite well before starting the podcast, but I actually discovered that I didn't know anything about it. And I learned a lot with the podcast. And the podcast kind of teach me what Bitcoiners are really all about, what Bitcoin in itself is really all about, where it is going, what are the kind of the phases we will shift in. And I learned a lot other things also. I went down rabbit holes with guests around parenting, around diet, around spirituality, around so many other topics. I mean, today I released a podcast talking about how Bitcoin influences sex, and I'm like, oh, like that's an interesting rabbit hole that I didn't thought a year ago I would ever go down. But I learned a lot with the podcast, obviously around Bitcoin. But the side things is like the behind the scenes processes, the things that you need to build a podcast. I want to make it more tangible. For example, when you have a podcast and you do everything yourself, you have a lot of different tasks that you have. You are the producer, you are the interviewer, you are the post-production guy, you're the director, you're the bookkeeping guy, you're the tax guy, you're the everything guy. So you keep track of whatever you do in a week and figure out, okay, what is the first thing? And that's actually something that I did this year. What is the first thing that is something that I can outsource, that I can already afford to outsource and make sense to also outsource? And then you go down the list of like, okay, how do I actually build a business? How do I actually employ someone next to me? How do I actually put that whole Bitcoin thing in a little bit more of a professional line and not just make it depending on me, and go from a sole content creator to making a small media company? I'm at the right of the start of my journey, so I'm very, very much at the starting point. But I try to lay the foundations already now to make the growth later better. So I have a big vision for the media company I'm trying to accomplish, like a freedom focused media company, and the logical start is Bitcoin, but there are a lot of other things that we have to teach and educate people around freedom, because what money we use is unfortunately very important, but shouldn't be the main important thing of how to gain more freedom, how to be a more freedom loving person, a more person that has more freedom inside but also outside freedom. That's another whole rabbit hole of like freedom within you and freedom outside. That shocked me also when we went down those rabbit holes on my podcast. So there are a lot of things that I've learned, and a lot of things that come with the podcast. But the main takeaway for me the last couple of months, or like the 1 year, is if you are extremely honest and extremely curious about everything that you see and encounter, you come a far way and you learn a lot with that.
And dialing back to how you started, at what point you started to learn about Bitcoin. I remember your talk with Ben Perrin, one of the person that all of us probably know, BTC sessions, that have learned a lot from. In your interview with him, you mentioned that probably Bitcoin wasn't the thing that you could talk a long time about in the beginning, but as you talk to more and more people, not teaching them about Bitcoin, but learning from them or hearing them talking about Bitcoin, you found yourself going on and on at a party talking about Bitcoin for 10 minutes or so. And what Ben said was that this kind of reverse osmosis that happens, that you just are in a room with people that know more about you about the subject, and you start to absorb the knowledge from them. Before that, how did you get to know Bitcoin? And probably most of us have had our doubts about it. It's very rare that from the get-go you get it. There are very rare exceptions. I want to know how your journey was into Bitcoin. Was it related in any way to the kind of job that you were doing and the kind of things that you had studied? Was it related to coding, to IT security, or anyway, or your interest, or your concern with accounting had a role to play there?
Not at all. I got Bitcoin. I got into savings very much in the beginning of my life because I was a very savings person. I remember when my mom gave me some euros to spend in the lunchtime for my school. I usually saved like 1-2 euros from there to save up some cash for myself. So I was like, even back then, a very savings person, which is not that common. I think most kids, I don't know, but I think most kids, if you give them 5 euros to spend, they usually spend 5 euros on food, on like sweets and stuff like that. And I wasn't that kid. I was always very saving. So one thing that Bitcoin didn't bring to my life is the savings part, because this what has been always with me. And that made me realize very soon that that I had I had, because of that, very soon, some money. So I had, like, with 18 years old, I think like 500 euros or something like that, where I just started out with working, but I was still a student, so I was not really was not really working a lot, but I had some side jobs, and then so I gained some money, and I gained like I think 500 euros or something like that, and so with that money, I actually went ahead and said, like, okay, what can I do with that? And the first thing is like a savings account. I was like, okay, I'm savings account makes sense. And I got some interest rates on there. I didn't understand anything about money, but I got some interest on that. And I was like, okay, that's nothing. So I can also not do it. It's like literally makes no sense at all. But then I looked more and more into ETFs. I looked more into other forms of saving, even though it's investing. But back then I thought it's savings. And the interesting thing that happens is, once you put money in the stock market, I was really curious about it. I wanted to learn more. I was like, okay, well, like, what is that about? And so I got more and more into ETFs. But then I was like, okay, there's also individual stocks. Like ETFs, basically just big stocks. I was like, okay, maybe I can do it better than those guys. And I just did it. And I was like, okay, let's do it with ETF. Let's do it yourself. And I was actually quite good in it. And the thing is, I thought I was good in it, but I was just lucky. It was a good time. Like I invested in a time where almost everything is going up, and in that time where almost everything is going up, I invested, and I was basically making some profits in 5-6 years times. And people were asking me like, "Oh, like how do you do that? Like what's the thing?" And I tried to learn people what I do. I try to teach my aunt. I try to teach people that were curious about it what I do, but they never really wanted to learn what I do with stock picking. They actually just wanted to learn of like where to park your money. But I didn't get that. I tried to learn them how to pick stocks and tried to learn them about management teams and 10Qs and 10Ks and stuff like that. So that was not successful at all. And at some point, people came up to me and was like, "Oh, like, what is that Bitcoin thing?" I think 2017 was around that the first time we Bitcoiners always have a first time where we hear about Bitcoin, and then a first time where we actually listen to someone around Bitcoin. And the first time I heard about Bitcoin was 2017. You have to imagine I was a stock boy, and I was really into that, and had that mindset of cash flow. So I thought Bitcoin is a scam for 2017 till 2020, and that's basically was my real conviction for 3 years straight, up until someone came up to me like, "Oh, like what's Bitcoin? Like why are you thinking it's a scam?" He was not even a Bitcoiner, but he just wanted to learn what I think about Bitcoin. And I discovered that I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't really know anything substantial about it, and I was discovering that my my arguments are not sustainable enough and not good enough. So I went in a weekend's rush of like Friday to Sunday to figure out why Bitcoin is a scam, or like to figure out to get more arguments against Bitcoin, or to figure out that Bitcoin thing overall. And on Friday I went in with like Bitcoin is a scam. On Sunday I came out and like, oh, maybe Bitcoin is actually something. So I definitely went from being almost like a hater of Bitcoin to being someone that is like at least curious around Bitcoin. It took me 3 years. But on Sunday, I went out, and then Monday, I opened my Coinbase account. Tuesday, I bought a ledger. I don't recommend those two companies now, but I used it back then. And it was interesting because that was basically my starting point with Bitcoin. And from that point onwards, it just got deeper and deeper and deeper. So it took me from that point around 1 year to go all in. And every week I learned more about Bitcoin. Every week I learned more about Bitcoin. And it just took me down a deeper and deeper rabbit hole around Bitcoin. And it's an amazing journey so far, and I enjoy every minute of it.
Yeah, the interesting rabbit holes we go down to. And yeah, you mentioned about the rabbit hole about the effect of Bitcoin on sex. When you come to some conclusion, I would be happy to hear your results, the results of your research on that.
Oh, I can dive right into it.
Oh, do it, please.
I think it all breaks down to time preference. If you have a broken monetary system, and you most likely also have a higher time preference. So the Fiat way of having sex is going to a bar, hooking up with someone, and throwing them away again next day. So it's all about, if you want to meet someone, what's your time frame? Do you look for a quick hookup, which is the Fiat way of having sex, or do you want to find your life partner, which is the Bitcoin way of finding a partner, because it's low time preference? So it's really interesting how it also gives you higher standards in your life when you have a low time preference mindset. Because in that high time preference mindsets, you're like, okay, I search a sexual partner for today. You might not be that picky. Like it's like, from a bar, let's say there are 100 potential partners in there, you find 50 of them okay. But if your hunt is for, okay, I potentially want to spend the rest of my life with her, you are way more curious about the person. You ask better questions when you encounter her, and you are way more picky around that. So it gives you from like 50, all of a sudden only like maybe 3 in that one bar that might be okay to invest more time in it. And the same thing, I think, is the Bitcoin way of approaching dating. Don't search for hookup, search for a partner that you can spend your life with. And that's kind of where I think Bitcoin influences sex, not directly the sexual moment, but it also influences that. But the time and the commitment that leads up to that, and having a higher commitment from day one with that person, or at least the intention to have a way higher commitment, is very important in a Bitcoin mindset. And the Fiat way is like, oh, like, who cares who she is? I don't even want to know her name. I will not I will not tell my grandma about it. I was like, okay, no. The Bitcoin way is like, she has to be very good because I potentially want to spend the rest of my life with her. And if you approach dating like that, you raise your own standards. You raise your own questions that you have for other people, and you take things slower, and you take things more serious, which I think is a very attractive thing to do.
Yeah, beautiful. So let's ponder about it, do you think that this hookup culture is a fiat thing mostly?
This hookup culture is driven by a lot of things. First of all, we have cheap money, which brings a fucked up time preference, or like a higher time preference, which is not good. But also we have a complete new wave of social media, which also brings out everything of humanity to your phone, which is a good thing and a bad thing. So I think humanity has to learn how to deal with that new technology and what it brings with us. I think the internet and global communication overall is a very good thing, but humanity has to learn what it actually means to have that available and what responsibility we have. So that trend is also a little bit fiat, but it's a good trend that we have global communication. Otherwise, like, this wouldn't be impossible. So yes, it's a fiat thing, hookup culture. But I think even in a fully Bitcoin world, even if you're living now on a Bitcoin standard, we would still have hookup culture to a certain degree, but probably way less than that. And also, I do think that Bitcoin fixes the incentive for most of what we do, but it doesn't fix anything. Doesn't fix everything, because humans still have flaws. We still are very emotional driven persons and people, and we still have complications. We will still be envy. We will still be angry. We will still have conflicts with other nations, and we will still have like conflicts in the family and friends. The frame of those things just changes, because Bitcoin gives security back to the individual. If you have $2,000 on the bank account, it's a different thing of when you have $200,000 in the bank account. And in a Bitcoin world, you're more likely and you have a better chance of accumulating a good amount on your Bitcoin bank account. This gives you security. This gives you calmness. And I have never met an very happy person that is happy with his life, that is angry at that point. If someone is angry or really frustrated, there's usually something not going right in their lives currently. So and this comes a lot from like security, of like having the security or having the insecurity around things, and money plays a big part of it, but not the whole part of it. It's not 100%, but it's probably like 50% of it.
Yeah, the Bitcoin. We say Bitcoin fixes this, fixes that. That is nice as a kind of meme, as a slogan, but truly it improved things. And still, there are governments who want to go to wars against each other. There are people with all kinds of malicious wants and desires, and we cannot stop people from robbery or from aggression. But it would be definitely something to that would improve our lives. The things that are caused by our fiat money and our melting ice cubes. I am very happy that we got that digression about Bitcoin and sex. That was an interesting one. Now going back, I want to know how much you have been successful in convincing, when it comes to convincing other people to become a Bitcoiner, and maybe tell us some really interesting story of people that you have met in real life that you have orange pilled, maybe through your podcast or maybe through personal interaction.
It's really interesting because when I'm trying to orange, there's a difference between someone buying Bitcoin and someone being a Bitcoiner, and someone buying Bitcoin is not even that hard to get someone to at least buy a little bit, like 1%, 5%, whatever of their portfolio and put that in Bitcoin, it's not that hard of a sale to make. But showing someone what it means to be a Bitcoiner and leading someone in that direction, that's a whole nother game level, which is very hard, and you probably waste a lot of time if you really want to accomplish that. So you're better off trying to get people to buy their first satoshis, to buy the first few micro bitcoins, whatever you want to call it. So with that, you have to be present, you have to be kind. And I think before we start about orange pilling story, I think there's an overall thing in the Bitcoin community where we say like, oh, like have fun staying poor, he won't make it, all those memes, I think, are not good for the Bitcoin community and for Bitcoin overall. We have to be kind to people, and we have to drive a positive financial revolution, because I think it's inevitable that we get to a full Bitcoin standard. But the way we get there is not determined. We can get there with civil war, but we can also get there with a peaceful revolution. And a lot of it depends on how we Bitcoin interact with each other, interact with no coiners, and interact with the fiat world. And if we are kind, if we are open, if we are bridging the gap between the no coiners and Bitcoiner in a very nice, open, and kind way, that is the future superpower. That is the way of making that revolution a peaceful revolution. So if you ever made fun of someone because he didn't get Bitcoin, or he has a not so good of an opinion on Bitcoin because he isn't informed, or maybe because he even has an agenda, think twice before you do that, because you are basically punishing someone for his behavior, and you in that moment you act very rudely to that person. Maybe he even deserves it, but we Bitcoiners have to be better than that. We Bitcoiners have to be so kind and so open and so loving that people are like, oh, like those Bitcoiners, like it's really interesting. I don't get the value of Bitcoin, but there seems to be something really interesting. It's Lex Friedman was once talking with Seiferdin around that topic, and Lex said something interesting in the time while he was talking to Seiferdin. Lex said,
Yeah.
I don't get Bitcoin yet fully, but one thing I understand, that it is something substantial, because every Bitcoiner I ever met is extremely helpful and is extremely smart. And he's like, if I see something new where all the people involved are extremely helpful and extremely smart, this is usually a huge revolution coming. I don't remember the exact words, but somewhere along those lines he said it. And we Bitcoiners represent Bitcoin. Bitcoin has no marketing team, but the marketing team of Bitcoin is every Bitcoiner. So if you have Bitcoin and people know that, how you behave for Bitcoin and represent that makes a difference. If you have a shirt on from your own company, you are spitting someone in the face, or like you are really aggressive against someone, that someone does not only remember you, but also the company that you work for and the icons and that you encounter and the things that you believe in. We are humans, so that's unfortunately how we work. So don't forget that you represent Bitcoin, and we should have people that represent Bitcoin in the best possible way, in the kindest and most loving way possible, and especially against the crypto crowd and the altcoin crowd. It's very hard sometimes because there are arguments sometimes lack any evidence of anything, basically. But we still have to be compassionate, because almost every Bitcoiner had his shitcoin phase, and even shitcoining is a phrase that we throw around very a lot, even me. But maybe it's not a good idea to do that, because it automatically says like they are nothing worth. It's not only that their coin is nothing worth, but also they are nothing worth. So we should be careful of how we want to be presented, and I think it's a good thing to be loving, caring, and kind, but still very we should not confuse that with complacency and with like, oh, like, okay, it's so fine. We should still search for that argument. We still search for that intellectual exchange and try to make an impact and try to argue with people, but just in a kind and loving way. So there's a difference between just being complacent and not arguing at all and like, oh, like, okay, I don't want to get in that. And the other side would be like saying like, oh, like, have fun staying poor, you don't know anything, you're an asshole. Those are the two extremes, and I think the middle ground is like finding objective arguments and being kind in that. So and that helped a lot in orange pilling people, because I've seen people in my life that have been extremely against Bitcoin, and I've always been respectful and always been caring and loving with them, and said like, hey, like, I fully understand that, but there's this 1-2 points that you might want to consider of that one argument that you brought up, and this helps way better in orange pilling people. They are not convinced on day one when you tell them these things, but maybe in year 2 or year 3, they all of a sudden like, oh, like, actually, you were kind of right, Robin. Like, okay, that's actually that makes sense a lot. And so that's a better way to do it, and it's a more loving and kind way to do it. The other way to do it is he brings something up, and you respond with like, oh, have fun staying poor, you won't get it, you won't make it. In that moment, you bombed that bridge to Bitcoin for that person for the next 10 years. he now not only thinks that you are personally an asshole, but you also think he also thinks that Bitcoin is an asshole. So being aware of what you have done in that one moment is very important. And I recommend for anyone that wants to go deeper on that topic, I have a podcast with Michael Seyr, and it's very easy to find. You just have to go to my YouTube channel. It's literally the first video that I display. And he talks about how to be a good salesman. And that's literally the same exact thing I'm just talking about, but he's better in speaking, so maybe it makes sense, makes more sense when he's saying it. It's somewhere in the middle. It's in the timex in there, I think around like 1 hour, like 50 minutes or something like that. And he really talks about how he grew his company and how he's thinking about sales in MicroStrategy and how he grew the company so successfully and big, because the company was successful and big before Bitcoin. Now it just got way more successful and way more big, even, but like that. That's very important for Bitcoin, that we need kind and loving persons. And I was, before the podcast, a very toxic Bitcoin maxi, and I rebranded a little bit to like, I'm Bitcoin only. Like, I don't think Bitcoin will solve the world and is the only thing that matters, but I'm Bitcoin only. Like, there's nothing else in my portfolio, nothing else that I hold. But I respect whatever you do with your altcoins. I respect whatever you do with your ETFs or your real estate portfolio. It's just not the way for me. And if you really want to learn why I'm all in Bitcoin, let's sit down and I answer all your questions. This opens everything up. If you tell if someone with a real estate portfolio comes to you and like, oh, like that's so risky that you all have in Bitcoin, and you're telling, yeah, there's some risks to it, but if you want, I can explain to you why I did that, and I am happy to answer all your questions. Um, you immediately welcome them to the community in that moment, and just like acknowledging what he said and trying to give him the opportunity to learn in that moment is very important.
I can say that I 100% agree with everything that you just said, that we really need more compassion in the space, so we cannot grow Bitcoin by being toxic. Maybe we are even right. Maybe at some point they will come around, but are you going to invite other people by being toxic, so that one day you can say, I told you so? Or do you want to ease the way to hyper Bitcoinization by being more sympathetic, with more empathy to other people?
You have to ask yourself the question, is it better to tell them in 10 years, I told you so, because they didn't buy? Or is it better in 10 years to tell them, oh, I told you so, because they bought, because you were kind, because they might not have bought in the first year, but they came around in the fourth year. And just dropping one or two small things around Bitcoin. I was actually recently an uncle of mine said to me like, oh, like Bitcoin uses so much energy, like it's an environment pig is the English translation. I don't know if that makes sense. It's a German word. So they basically said like, oh, like Bitcoin is bad for the environment. And my reaction to that is with always the same. Oh, like why do you think so? Oh, interesting. What is your theory around that? And that is another kind of strategy with orange pilling. If someone has a strong opinion against Bitcoin, they usually don't have a lot of evidence for that. So you don't even have to argue. You just have to ask questions. After the fourth question, they don't have any more arguments because they ran out of arguments, because they didn't really look up the topic. They just read a headline. So if you ask like, okay, like, oh, I think that Bitcoin is bad for the environment. Okay, why do you think so? And then, but then you're like, okay, this and that. And then like, okay, why is that? Like, you just try to figure out what they are thinking about Bitcoin and why they think so like that. And often in that loop, they're actually discovering that they don't have good arguments. It was with me the same case. Someone that wasn't even a Bitcoiner was asking me about Bitcoin and asked so many questions that I was discovering for myself without him saying it to me. Oh, I don't have good arguments around Bitcoin. And also, you don't want to be a teacher. You want to be someone that gets asked. So if he comes around and says like, oh, like, okay, what is that with Bitcoin? You just like answer them their question, and they also discover on the other end of it that you always have more to say, and that you actually research Bitcoin deeply. So like that's how you get to know if someone actually knows something. If someone is a critic, they usually didn't study Bitcoin, so you ask them 4 questions. After the third question, they don't even know anything anymore. If you ask me why I'm bullish on Bitcoin and you go deeper and deeper and deeper, that conversation can go on for weeks. Like I can talk. I just like talk 500 hours around Bitcoin. There's a lot of material. The knowledge is really deep, and people are really impressed by that. If I had evenings where I sat down with people for 3 hours and they're like, we just asked you question after question after question, and after each question there's more coming in. It's deeper knowledge, and so the best way to orange pill people is like study it as hard as you can, and be kind and loving, and have empathy for the person, because you also at some point didn't get Bitcoin, so they also should get the chance of not getting Bitcoin.
Yeah, I can't find any better moment to Anyway, the note to end the podcast on. And we are reaching the 1 hour, and yeah, let's be sympathetic to others, be kind to others, and that's how we are going to grow Bitcoin, not by being toxic. Thank you, Robin. I enjoyed every second of this chat, and I learned a lot of things. And hope to see you in real life.
Really cool. Will be fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, sure.